Hello, Susan. Hello, everybody who's listening now. Hi, Annie. How are you? um, this is our third Facebook Live, right? This is the third
Yeah.
we've been out. Boy, oh boy, time flies. This week, I thought we would talk about some shoulder stuff, for lack of a better word, and I entitled the Facebook Live, the shoulder's connected too, and if you've been listening to us long enough, the shoulder's connected to everything, right? So I was looking back at our podcast episodes, and our most downloaded episode, ironically, given our audience, is the one on the shoulder. I think it's called "Is Shoulder Pain Really Coming from the Shoulder?" It was an early one, right, Susan? Like early, like
Mm-hmm.
the first
Mm-hmm.
10 or 15 that we did. So I thought this would be a good idea because I do have a couple of patients now who have some secondary issues in their shoulder that I thought I would just bring it up and just talk about some open chain versus closed chain shoulder activities. So, I mean, there's so many connections between the shoulder and the neck and the cranium and generally the CV joints that I think this would be a good topic. So I'm actually just going to start the live just by talking about a patient of mine. I won't even talk about her history because I don't want this to be like a podcast, but she actually had some issues with her knee, and secondarily she had some issues with her shoulder, and she could not do your single arm lift, right? So I think it was her right side. I call it a sal. So she overused her scalenes, her SCM, her upper traps. And this was a reasonably healthy woman, has kids, carries kids, puts them on, either side or hip. Well, not now, but she used to. Very fit, very athletic. And she just could not do an arm lift without over recruiting her shoulder, her neck muscles. And so, but she could do very easily wall push-ups, wall lands, plank, down dog, no problem at all, because that's a little bit more of a full body and a more of a thoracic, stabilizing position as well. So she couldn't do that. And interestingly enough, Susan, when she did that, her vision went blurry for like
Oh.
a teeny second. Like she did this arm lift and she's like, oh, my vision's weird. And so I'll also bring this up is that we talk about self-checks a lot in the podcast, and a self-check for the cranium. I'm not a cranial sacral person, but I've done some cranial work over the years. A good self-check for that is vision. So I had her read a piece of paper, anything. And then I had her do the arm lift, and then she read something and she's like, oh, it's worse. So, I mean, that's a shoulder movement, but what does that have to do with the shoulder?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
So, and you can see the overuse of this SCM and upper traps and scalene. So what I did is I took her way down, even lying on her back. So I had her go on her back, and she's significant anterior deltoid wasting too. Ironic. I mean, something that I didn't see at the beginning. I probably wasn't focusing on it because she had an issue with her knee. However, when we started doing upper extremity stuff, she complained or just noted that her arm was fatiguing a lot, and it was her dominant side. And so I actually got her on in supine and just literally on the floor and just having her just do no weight, just arm lifts. And she's like, oh, I still feel it. I'm like, your head should be relaxed. So I had her put her on like an overball. She was too flexed, and then she was compressing. So this is virtually, mind you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I had her down on her back with a little bit of a ball, like a little bit of support. And that was much better. So do you want to comment on that or bring up anything? And
Well, the thing that's ringing true for me right now is like what's happening in her upper cervical spine, or is there a reason for this vestibular ocular cervical reflexive system to be out of whack, and is that why she's over recruiting when she's doing open chain movements, and why is her vision getting wonky? So of course my thing would be like, what happens if we exercise the eyes a bit and then go back and see if she can lift the arm better? I don't know. It's kind of, but there is that connection. And I think that's important to realize that sometimes, if they've got great range of motion and they can hold things in closed chain, why can't they do it in open chain?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Because she could do closed chain, no problem. Is that really a shoulder problem?
Mm.
Not specifically, right?
Right. The shoulder moves, but why does the shoulder not have control?
Right.
Like what's the mechanism there that's creating this this movement pattern of over recruitment versus this nice clean movement that you're seeing in closed chain? And
Right.
sometimes that can be driven by some weakness, but it's also a coordination issue too. And I'm just kind of wondering what the underlying mechanism is. And it sounds like it's something a little bit neurological.
Yeah.
If her vision goes bad when she does that, I wonder if her vision goes bad with when she does head movements.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. It's
Does that
interesting.
knock it off too, or not? So
Right. Yeah. Just we also mentioned just as aside, we in our podcast that was released recently, the one last week, we talk about another patient of mine. And you talk about Scott Epps, right? With he's the PT for the Washington Wizards. The Wizards was the Washington basketball team.
That
I
was
was
it.
racking my brain, and I'm like, I should know basketball. I'm a basketball fan. And it was the Washington Wizards. And Susan mentioned in the podcast that Scott Epps, who's the physical therapist for the Wizards, he was looking at tape of somebody who sprained their ankle, and he was going up for a rebound, and I think you said he couldn't coordinate the eye movement with the land, and he was constantly
it was like a whole the way he described it was as he went up and turned and looked and the arm went up and everything, that he could see that he was going to come down on the side of his ankle.
Yeah.
And so somehow he was unable to disassociate out of that pattern, and so that made him start thinking about the neurological underpinning that may have been in effect that that wasn't rehabbed back in when his ankle rehab went on, because the ankle rehab was specific to the ankle, which makes sense, but they never they didn't bring it all the way back into that, like those full functional types of movements. And he was wondering if there was a neurological piece that should have been rehabbed in,
right,
so that the pattern could have changed, because what was in there was a pattern that maybe the ankle wasn't reintegrated back into.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it is
interesting
interesting
listening to him talk about it and describe it, because it certainly made a lot of sense.
Yeah, it is. And I remember years ago, Derrick Rose, who played for the Knicks at one time, and he played for the Bulls. He had he tore his ACL, and I think in the tape, one of the commentators or one of the I'm not sure where I read this. He could see he was gonna tear it mid land. He didn't even hit the floor yet, and he could tear. You could see the torque in the knee. Something has to do with how their reaction, their coordinations. I mean, I know we're digressing here, but I thought that was really interesting, because with this particular patient of mine, she, how do you differentiate a true shoulder problem via, for example, or an upper thoracic issue or a neck problem? And several patients that I've had have been able to do, wall lands and wall push-ups and sort of typical closed chain movements. And that's not, and they can't do open chain. So that means to me that there's clearly a glenohumeral in the differential, that there clearly is a glenohumeral, or in my experience, in my clinical, in my clinical practice, what I see a lot of is this anterior deltoid wasting, right? But is that wasting from just of a true strength deficit, or is it something neurological?
Or is it a nerve root injury that's set up but then you would have to, so if you're thinking nerve root going back up into the neck versus maybe something impinging neurologically peripherally, in the shoulder, or, a peripheral nerve injury, you would expect C4, C5,
Yep.
Or C4 for sure. And where else are you going to test that, and see if there's any, other problems, C5, C4, C5, and, is there any other atrophy showing up or weakness showing up, or is it just specific to that muscle? And if so, what was the reason for that?
Yeah, exactly. And, a couple of the patients I'm thinking about, while I was preparing some remarks here, was, these patients could do closed chain, couldn't do open. So I tried to progress them in ways that I thought would be appropriate to a pure glenohumeral joint issue, not an impingement or just a general weakness of the anterior deltoid. And someone suggested a while ago, I forgot where I read this. I did on one of the patients, I did some light tapping on the anterior deltoid while she was doing, she was supine, hook lying. I probably had a foam roller, not a foam roller, a foam block or like 2-pound weights in her hand, in one hand, or I usually start them with like interlocked like this, and then I'll just kind of do this. But um, I did some light tapping on her anterior deltoid, which actually helped and it sort of woke it up, so to speak. And then what I also did, I'm just looking at some notes here, I also had her not so much in sitting, because that's really where she kicked in this anterior, this scalene and upper trap. I had her lie and I had her take a TheraBand around her knee. So she's lying hook lying. The band is sort of wrapped on her right near the popliteal fossa, just above that. And just, not totally taut, but just have her do a little bit of that, sort of shorten the lever arms, just lift like that. And I will tell you, Susan, 15 reps with a short lever, low load band, she kick it in the anterior, the scalenes and the SCM, just in that position. And I almost wonder, when do we take people down to basic lift your arm up with no weight, lying on your back with your head supported? Because if you're using these motor, if you're standing there and you're doing this, this, and this, and you're kicking in all these accessory muscles, you're reinforcing a non-optimal, movement pattern. That's not going to serve you in the long run. It may help you if you have to lift up your child right this very second, who's 55 pounds. But in order to train that, you need to be able to. So when do we take the shoulder patient or any patient down to basics?
Yeah, exactly.
Just lie on your back and lift your arm up and really think about.
Can you just control basic movement?
Right.
And can you control it in a position to where you're not having to fight, or you're having to fight gravity in a different way, or you're having to move against gravity in a different way? So, laying down versus sitting versus standing, it kind of reminds me of a story that Jim Meadows, when I was going through a lot of stuff with him. For those of you who know him, he's an ortho guy that's been around for a long, long time. Tremendous respect for him. And he was talking about a patient very much similar that they just couldn't handle. They couldn't cope with an open chain. They could cope with closed chain. They could ride the ergonomic bike. They could do all of the different things. And he was just, racking his brain about why if you do Jim Meadows, it'd be, why the devil can't this guy do this? I mean, he used other expletives too, but, but anyway, one of the things he talked about was, he said he just started doing, it's when I kind of started learning about modified closed chain. Or modified open chain. I guess it's both, really. It's like, where do you meet that? Where can you meet the movement system so that it can be successful and begin to retrain itself? And if they can't cope with open chain at all, and they can cope with closed chain, somewhere in the middle's got to be the truth, right?
Yeah.
And so, he talked about taking his finger and putting it on the guy's palm, and the guy's arm was opened out, and he just kept his finger there so that the guy had to push, kind of almost like push against it a little bit, have contact. And they were able to kind of raise up and start to move and do those things. Yeah. And so, he didn't really have much of an explanation for it, other than it was just something different. It was a novel movement.
So he literally put Jim Meadows put his hand
he just stuck his fingers in his palm and said, okay, let's move. I mean, it's just, I was desperate to get the guy to move. And, so he was just, wondering, and he thought, well, maybe I can feel something if I just put my fingers up against him and kind of feel where the stuff is, or what was happening. And the guy was able to kind of track and move easier.
Yeah.
And so that's where, I've kind of been doing a lot when I have people who are like that. I use the wall a lot. And we may start with the whole hand on the wall and just kind of start to trace, figures on the wall. Like you were talking about with them laying on their back, and they even just hold their arm up there and maybe start to move off of that a little bit, those basic movements. I just have them get on the wall and kind of like, what can you do?
Yep.
And can you do it without this, kind of getting all caught up in here? Can you just like, just what's the range that you have? What can you do? And can you like draw, trace, move? Then you can do it with their hand on the side of the wall, like, just kind of like going up. So just the side of the hand, just gliding on the wall, and you can have them turn and kind of see do they need to move more in front of their body? Can they track
Yep.
backwards, by gliding on the wall?
Yep.
Uh, just enough to give them input so that other muscles don't have to over recruit. And I'm not sure if it's because it's sensory input coming in, or if it just unweights the arm enough
Yeah.
that they can, but not, so it unweights the arm enough, but not totally like a closed chain would.
Yep.
You
Yep.
see what I'm saying? Because it's
Yeah.
still an open chain movement, but it's got the wall to assist it,
Yeah.
rather than, you know, totally take over and have
Oh,
the trunk do all the movement on the shoulder.
right, right. I really like that because, you can the supine position after a while, and I started these people out in supine,
Mm-hmm.
tricep extensions, things like that. But after a while, and when I took her back down to that, just lift the arm up with me tapping on your deltoid, I felt like it was in, day one pace,
Mm-hmm.
PT 101 type of thing. But I think that's important. But I like that interim because I use the wall a lot as well. But I like that novel input because, and you could be drawing a triangle, you could be drawing your name. It's
Mm-hmm.
distracting. It's taking your brain and focusing less on this and more on, let me see if I can draw my name, or,
Exactly. Yeah. What is the meaning behind the movement, rather
yeah,
than the getting caught up in the actual, what do we call, biomechanics of the movement,
yes,
giving that movement a lot more meaning or something different to think about. Because if you think about it too, with closed chain, it's a little different because now you've got the trunk moving on the arm, so the joint itself can handle the range of motion. That's not the issue. It's the coordination around the joint that is not happening as well in that kind of situation that you're talking
mm-hmm.
about. And of course then it gets a
Mm-hmm.
little tricky if the eyes aren't working as well, and or that it's changing their vision a little bit. It's like, wow, could that be something so chronic that's been going on that it like just kind of pulls them off a bit?
Yeah,
Who knows? We know so little about the neurological system
yeah,
and how it all fits together, and actually how to retrain it. We know nothing.
yeah.
We have ideas, we have thoughts. We certainly have a lot of anecdotal, things that, tips and tricks and things that we can do. But we don't really know how that tracking system maybe gets pulled off in the brain just enough
Mhm.
to like distort vision enough.
Yeah, it's interesting because I almost want to. I'm still, so this is fascinating to me. And when we talked about it on the podcast about Scott Epsley, I was like, have them use their vision, training the arm, like
Mm-hmm.
have your gaze, have your eyes. At the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, whether you're a professional athlete or not, your eyes need to follow at some point, right? And training
Mm-hmm.
the eyes and the brain in a way like that really will help that reflex. And I like that. I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great I'm going to be doing that more with the vision, because when she told me that her vision was blurry, I'm like, whoa. And I knew that it wasn't like anything bad because I know her well enough, but
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay. And when we did the whole read something, don't read something, see how it is. And it definitely was nothing related, nothing sinister, right? So I like that, instead of taking someone like going from supine to just sitting and just having them lift their arm up, because that's also, that is also hard for people. I had this patient I'm talking about, I had her go into a kneeling position.
Mm-hmm.
And I had her, I think she was on a foam, I think this was on a floor. She was on the floor, but I said, go on a foam pad or a pillow. She has a little gym at home or whatever. And it's interesting, when she was on the foam pad, it was better for her to lift her arm up than kneeling on the hard floor. I'm just talking high kneeling, like you're in church, right?
Yeah. That's the stuff that always gives me pause. Whenever somebody wants to like give a lot of challenge into biomechanics and this and that, it's like, then why does it change when you do something as simple as put them on a foam instead of on the floor, and they're in a kneeling position? How does that have to do with the shoulder biomechanically?
Right.
Nothing, but it has everything to do with input, sensory system, neuro, and I just find this stuff fascinating.
Yeah, I do too.
Like, and it's so, but what it does is gives us a kind of pause in a way to kind of say, maybe I need to vary up what I'm doing in my eval and my interventions. Like,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just picking at the shoulder and picking at the shoulder and picking at the shoulder and trying to get it to move a certain way and, doing these things, what would happen if I put them in half kneeling and I put them in kneeling? What happens if they're laying on their side? Can they raise their arm a little bit differently?
Yes.
What can they do? What is like real meaning for them? Is it, where are they struggling? Do they need to slide their arm up the side of the closet to reach up and grab the coat hanger until they can finally kind of coordinate that movement better? What are the different things we can do? Are they coping better with shoes on and shoes off? And if so, why?
Yes. Yes. I agree 100%. And I think, because we've, years ago, or people who are still in school now learn very little about a lot of the neurological relationships to biomechanical issues. And the shoulder, obviously you can't lift your arm up. Yes, there's many things in the differential, but more and more I find that if you just change the context of the movement, yes, you're going to work on it. Let's say your assumption is it's anterior deltoid weakness with an accessory muscle overuse of the scalenes, SCM, upper traps, with a little bit of an issue in the head, right, with vision. So you can still work that, but change the context. Slide lying is great, takes out gravity, right? I love, the kneeling, the half kneeling. Have them walk backwards and do that, right? Seriously.
Yeah, just what can you do to change and see if you can actually get the system to produce the, and this is motor control.
Yes.
This is Shumway and Cook motor control one-on-one is
Yes.
like, if you can't get the movement that way, try this way. What you're looking at is that dynamical theory of what movement is actually what is going to be the emerging output with these inputs to the system. So if the input is walking backwards, what is the output of the arm movement?
Yes.
If you get them on a foam, on their knees, does that significantly change the motor output or not? And, and why? Does that make my theory would be that makes the system has to be more nimble.
Yep.
Because now they're kind of on a, kind of a little moving surface, and that input is enough to change it. Maybe it's the opposite for some people. You get them on that and it's worse, and you get them on something a little bit more level where they don't have to adjust as much and they do better. It's kind of, I find it fascinating.
Yeah, I know.
To be able to do that, but that's just so clever. Like, I just put foam under their knees to see what would happen. And that's basically what we need to do, is just like, see what happens. There isn't a recipe for it, but it makes it a lot of fun.
Yes. And
then you're like, and you're getting shoulder work done, and you're getting movement done, and you're getting new patterns, novel input to the system to just see what the emergent pattern might be.
Yeah.
And see how you can begin to see if that begins to clean it up somewhere else. What happens, I would love to know what happened after you got them on the foam. Did you go back and just have them just raise their arm in a, sitting or?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah. So I went.
Was it better?
Yes. So I had so I had her do like her self check, right? So she has two. One is neck rotation, and neck rotation to that same side was better. So and then I had her just do a basic arm raise, and that was also better. So I agree with you. Is the nervous system focusing on trying to stabilize, just try not to fall off the foam pedal? That's not a hard activity, but it's directing the focus somewhere else. And there's been a lot of research. When I was writing my book, I was really into this and about changing the context of a movement. Have them do it outside, or have them even better. If there's something they enjoy doing, like let's say getting on a bike, have them raise their arm doing something they enjoy doing. Have them, sing. This article that I was reading for the book was fascinating. If you can, if you really truly want to focus on the shoulder and getting that arm lift better, and you believe that the shoulder is the source of that problem, and you want to train that movement, there's so many options for movement. And if you think there's a neck component, you can literally, have them on their hands and knees, have them raise their arm up and turn their head. There's so many options, right?
Right. And I think I love this. I love this conversation because when I knew we were going to talk about the shoulder, I wanted to figure out how to bring in, breast cancer and breast cancer recovery, particularly post-surgical, post-radiation. Yeah. And there's, such a popular program out there called Casting for Recovery. It's absolutely fantastic because it takes them and, they're fly fishing and doing movements. These are
Ooh.
normal everyday shoulder movements that they may be having trouble with, but now you have them outside. You have them in waders, you have them in the water.
Oh, I like that.
You've got nature, you've got community, you've got, you have all of this rich context for this movement pattern to emerge and to begin to change in.
Yeah.
And is it the fact that, casein is the thing that makes them better, or is it all of that richness of that environment is what begins to, a different pattern will emerge, or maybe a pattern with less pain or less stiffness or less protection begins to emerge because of those things. And I love that whole piece about context, because I've always said this, if you want somebody to walk differently, change their shoes. It's that simple. Because the environment in which their feet are in is going to dictate some of the emerging movement pattern. And watch people in high heels walk different than people in tennis shoes. And they should, because it's a different platform that they're balancing their entire body on. And, and so why would the shoulder be any different? Of course you can't, you're not going to put a roller skate on the bottom of your hand and slide along, but we certainly do that for exercise.
Yeah. I know I've had a patient who told me, she's like, can I just do some deep breathing? I'm like, go for it. Just keep breathing and elevate your arm. Do whatever you need to do to just, and not so much not to focus on the movement, but do whatever you need to do to make it enjoyable for yourself. Because who wants to do an exercise that's boring or they have to do because their physical therapist told them to do it? And that's not going to ensure compliance in the long run, I believe. And with this particular patient, I had her literally take the band down below the shoulder 90 degrees and had her literally do with the band, just, lateral movements, just take it below 90. And that was actually still getting her with the band. So she likes to dance. I'm like, perfect. Take the band off. Let's go back. No weight, nothing. Let's keep you in standing. And I want you to just move your arms any which way you can. Look at, turn your head, look at your, use the vision and move, because she's doing this all day long. Dishes, your movement. This is what she's doing. So that's part of her exercise program. But the reason why I brought her up is because she experienced this typical over recruitment of these neck muscles with an arm lift. And she was pretty in tune with her whole body, and you really felt it there. And that is a common problem. I'd see it with myself as well. I do weights, I spin in, in Soul Cycle, and weights are part of the class there. And I'm doing this with my right arm and I can feel it in my neck. I've got neck problems. So, is that reinforcing a pattern for me that's not going to serve? Yeah. So sometimes I drop the weight. It's better to drop the weight and have no weight at all and really get the basics down. The no pain, no gain doesn't work here, So I do believe that, especially when it comes not just to the shoulder, but that's the topic of the Facebook Live today. But I think you need to sometimes just take it down to basics. Real basics, because once they start to lessen the recruitment of these muscles, they're all of a sudden they're going to work that anterior deltoid, and they will miraculously get stronger, right?
How much do you think perception of perceived exertion, not perceived exertion, but perceived difficulty plays into this? Like, they've been struggling to get their arm up, or it always causes this stuff going on, or maybe they have a pain response or something else. And so how many people have told them to lift their arm up like this, or to do this, or, to don't do that, and don't lift your shoulder up when you lift your arm? I'm just wondering how much perceived difficulty, like they just look at that and they go, I can't do that. And so therefore they just, what I'm saying, it's just they're going to have a funny pattern emerge just because they're perceiving that it's just, there's no way I can lift that weight up and do this while I'm bike riding. I can't even do it without a weight. You know what I'm saying? I'm just wondering how much of that is, because we were talking about joy and environment and, making things like changing context, but I'm also wondering about addressing, the fear avoidance, or the perceived difficulty, like I already know I'm going to fail. So therefore
Right.
that's going to, their brain is just going to give them that output.
Right. Right.
I'm just wondering about that too, especially when it comes to stuff like, with just movements in general. Like maybe they've quit reaching across to the other side of the sink
Right.
because they had a pain experience and it kind of kept up, and now they've kind of like stopped doing it completely. And then
Yep.
you're asking them to do it and they're kind of thinking, oh, that's not gonna work, but then you change the context for them
Yep.
and kind of say, well, what happens if you did it this way, or if you did it this way? And does that take out, part of it is, does that take out the perceived difficulty for them,
Yes. It takes
so
out the
that,
fear.
yeah, they aren't, automatically thinking that they're going to fail, that maybe the change of context helps them perceive, yeah, well, let's see what happens. If they can get curious and perceive what happens, maybe you could build in success rather than automatic failure.
Right. 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 And I agree. I mean, I do think that changing the context of any movement pattern will
Mm-hmm.
decrease that fear. And especially when the person's so fixated on, even if you're doing the same movement, you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it in different positions, or doing it in a different environment, like the
Mm-hmm.
casting. It's called Casting for Recovery. Is that the name of the group
Yeah,
for the
that's the name of the program. Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. I love that,
Mm-hmm.
because that's amazing. I had not heard of that, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a great concept, and that just goes to show you, you just change the environment.
Yeah.
And so with her, I really took it down to basics, and I don't particularly think that she needs to sit there and do military presses 5 pound. I just don't, because she's lifting children up and obviously over recruiting a lot, but you have to, in that situation, if you're not strong enough, you need to recruit, much more than your shoulder muscles when you're lifting a child off the floor. But I also wanted to bring up just a quick thing on another patient of mine. He had are you okay for me to move on, or
Mm-hmm.
good? Okay. So he had issues with his hip, and secondarily issues with his shoulder. And his main driver was his lack of control in the thorax. Secondarily, he had the shoulder issues, mostly internal rotation, and then end range external. We didn't focus on that at the beginning. It was not a problem. He could do push-ups. This is another one. Could do push-ups, no problem. No problem. Able to lift, do an arm lift, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
But there were certain movements, end range, external rotation, and end range internal. His history was a swimmer, and he's in his 30s now, I think early 30s. So when the hip got better, he started to do some things, many more things outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which involved the shoulder. So he said to me, well, I've done all those rotator cuff exercises before. I've done internal, external, didn't help. I've like, of course it didn't help, because that wasn't your primary issue. Your primary issue is a loss of control here. Now that you have better control and your thorax is more robust, the exercises that I'm going to give you are going to work. I didn't say it that way, but I was like, yes, because at the end of the day, if the cause of your shoulder problem is somewhere else, and that was not addressed, which it was not addressed prior, the other people he saw, this course isn't going to work. So what we ended up doing, because since it was secondary, I did give him your typical, 45-degree. He wasn't doing the 90-degree internal, external rotation. I don't know if you give that out a lot. I do, but to do that, and I wanted to disbelieve. I wanted him to not have that belief that this isn't going to work. So I told him to just do that 45-90 internal, external, do some throwing, play with your your family. He came back and he told me, oh, throwing the baseball really helped. Movement really helped me. And I was like, I wonder why. You want to comment on that, or should I
Yeah,
keep
I
going?
do actually.
Okay.
One of the predictors of a great pitcher in baseball is the activity and development of his lower body.
Oh yeah.
So look at their hips, look at their glutes, look at their hamstrings, look at their legs. The more power they have below, the more power they have above. Their their shoulder, particularly shoulder rotation, when you were talking about that, particularly shoulder rotation, the power comes from the lower body, not from the shoulder.
Yeah.
And you have to develop that power piece down below. And I just love this because that's what you worked on first.
Yes, yes.
And he used it and it translated up into his shoulder perfectly, because just standing there and doing this wasn't going to do anything for him.
Yep.
You know, you can only get so much power there doing that.
Yep.
Where the power comes from to get the trajectory and to do the things comes from the lower body. I think I read a statistic somewhere that 70% of the power and speed that comes out of a pitch comes from the lower body.
70%. Oh, that's
Yeah, I
interesting.
don't quote me on that. I just, but I know a tremendous amount comes from the lower body.
Yes.
And that's why they stand and go into that deep lunge, off a mound. I know I'm talking about an elite pitcher here, but if you look at anybody, go out and watch people throwing frisbees.
Yeah. Yes.
And watch what their lower body is doing and
Yeah.
the rotation that goes into it. The rotation doesn't come from the arm, it comes from the trunk, and the power coming through the legs, to do all of those crazy ultimate frisbee things that people do. So, and that's not even like a baseball that you're trying to throw 100 miles an hour into a little bitty, square.
Yep. Yep.
So, and I think that's brilliant because it is the movement for a lot of it. It's like, okay, once you can get the range there, which is what we were talking about with the other client.
Yes.
Then how do you get the power control and some of that cool things in there? And it comes by putting it together with that full body movement.
Yes.
That is so essential.
Yeah, and he had a hip issue, so that's why he came to me. And so it was able to do a lot of open chain, closed chain movements with regards to his hip, and he got a lot better because his thorax was his driver. We did a lot of specific, which is we talked about in the last Facebook Live, but he did incorporate that. So when he came back, I was like, that, the basketball, any kind of throwing, it's like, that's why you're doing all this all day long. You're incorporating your full body and you've got a more robust thorax. So you know what I had him do? I haven't given this one in a while. I had him, I actually talk about going back to basics. I said, have you done anything else besides internal, external rotation before, like prior to seeing me? He's like, no. So it literally went to a bit back to basics, I had him stand in stride stance in the doorway or wherever he could, doing isometric internal, external rotation in varying degrees of lunges, right, like pitcher almost, like right and left, having
pulling the power of the lower body into it.
Exactly. And then I had
recruit all the way through.
Yep. Right. And so, and that's meaningful for people, especially, not going to stand there all day. Oh, boom, hit the, 5 seconds. But if you're literally, once again, changing the context, getting into that lunge position, back and forth, helped. And so then I also told him I had him put a band in front and a band behind him, and literally same thing, but with the band. Then I told him, I said, no, a martini shaker. So I literally had him do this with my water bottle, but like plyo, like a body blade, the body blade. So we have one in our clinic. So, my water, but I had him I won't do it with the water because it's going to fall, but he literally like this, like this, this, like fast movement in different planes, in different positions, because he was squatting and lunging and doing everything for the hip, which was fine, but incorporating all those shoulder, plyos, for lack of a better word, really helped him. So what do you think about that? I mean,
yeah, totally. Because this takes me back to the podcast that we did with your young person who was a fencer.
Oh yes.
Remember that story?
Yes.
And, and so if you can just imagine and pay attention to fencers, you can tell I've been watching way too much Netflix since COVID. I'm watching like the Last Kingdom and oh my gosh, and all the, I just watch the whole body movements with these choreographed fencing things that they're doing. And it's all lower body. Yeah. Their power comes from their lower, and I remember talking specifically when we were doing that podcast, gosh, that was way back in the first year.
Yep.
With the lunging and the stuff with the feet and the lunging
on
and the
guard.
trunk and a lot of different things that were really key to getting that person back to where they wanted to be. And that was the piece that had been overlooked before.
Yes.
And I've seen this quite and it just makes me think about this guy that you worked on his hip first. And, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, why did the hip go wrong? Was it because he wasn't incorporating his lower body, or was one driving the other, or the other driving this? It's hard to say, but for sure, now that you have this person, and this is going to go to the podcast that we just dropped not too long ago is, what else gets revealed?
Right. Right.
Once you
With
get
the
people
foot
going with
driver.
one area that they're concerned about and something else comes up, that's the opportunity to continue the integration through the body,
Right. Right.
and to take those and to really bring meaning into that next piece, so you got the hips and leg and everything going really good. And he was stronger, so he could actually begin to use that
Yep.
to regain what he needed to regain in the shoulder. And like you said, you drove it all down to basics, but what did you put into those basics? You didn't just have him stand there and do it. You put him in lunges, you put him in different positions, you did it against a wall. You had a band that there was actually something that had to occur from the trunk, because there was even a minor resistance, it still required the trunk to kick in and to go with it.
Yes.
And so it wasn't just trying to isolate little bitty rotator cuff muscles, it was pulling it together in context of what that movement was going to look like. It was breaking the movement down, but you were bringing it back up too, and using that context of the whole body in there.
Yeah, I've had so many patients who come in with shoulder complaints. I have shoulder pain lifting my arm above my head, or I've pain down my arm. And and in their history, they've said, I've done the traditional rotator cuff strengthening, doesn't help.
Yeah.
Doesn't help. Like, that belief system is just, I don't believe that helps.
Mm-hmm. Because it didn't help them. It didn't return them to their function.
Right. And it maybe it could have been, it was done at the wrong part of the rehab, or it wasn't done in who knows?
Or it didn't have meaning. There's so many things that I wish we could say, oh, it was because of this and this. Well, we don't know, but what we can hang our hat on was, don't do the same thing. Let's find a different way to do it. What is it that you can't do? What are the functional activities and meaningful things that you are unable to do?
Yes.
And, I hear this all the time. People will say to the carpenter, well, he'll say, I cannot put up fans. I can't do anything overhead.
Yep.
And then people will say, well, you shouldn't be doing that. It's not good for you. Yeah. And it's like, this is the guy's living. Can't we figure out a way for him to do it? Yes, he may have to do it differently. He may need to take breaks. He may need to mix up. Maybe he didn't realize that he shouldn't be doing it 6 hours straight without a break.
Yeah.
But he's going to have to get up there and do that. He's got to make a living, and this is his craft.
Yep.
So, and the same thing, it'd be like telling a baseball player, well, you don't get to pitch anymore. No, it's like, no. Unless for some, unless it's just a hard, most of the time it's like, let's change the way you're doing it so you can be more successful, which is why great pitching coaches make a lot of money, because they sit there and they movement analyze and go, wow, if we could get you off your back foot better, I bet you'd have more drive going through on that fast pitch.
Exactly.
So
fascinating.
And I think a lot of what we get to do is just do it, real time, looking at people and breaking things down and kind of realizing what things can be broken down and brought back up, and what things need to be kind of rehabbed within the motion.
Yeah.
And, so at some point it was going to be silly to keep them doing bands. But that's where a lot of people discharge them. Okay, well, you have your band exercises. Good luck. Peace out.
Right, exactly.
And it's like, no, this person needs to be brought all the way back up to, we need to see them longer, and we need to give them that more functional context, that meaning to that activity, so that we can make sure that they've actually gotten back to where they want to get. So, I'm sure you probably told him, get out there and start throwing.
I did. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then he was like, wow, so much better.
And it's interesting because he said to me, he's like, oh, I get that now. I was doing this, and that's why I think like a light bulb went off in his head. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's why it made you feel better, because you were doing these movements in a different context, and you were doing more plyometrics.
Right. So now he's going to start thinking better when he has things that go wrong. He's got that ability, that process now that can lead to some more self-efficacy. So as he's pitching and feeling badly or something, maybe I need to change the way I'm moving, the whole thing. And he's gotten more opportunities to make changes now than just that single plane kind of movement thing.
Yeah. And I think it's fascinating. And I think that people who come in with complaints of shoulder issues, yes, it's connected to many things. It's obviously, you could have, a foot driven shoulder problem. The shoulder is just so important. I think that's why it was one of our most downloaded episodes to this day. It's amazing that it was, and that was early on, as I mentioned earlier, but I think that shoulder pain is very common, and it doesn't necessarily come from the shoulder. However, if you do believe that, and you're seeing a lot of your objective findings lead you to believe that it is the shoulder issue, it's important to really sometimes differentiate between, is it open chain versus closed chain? Is it a true strength issue? Is it a motor control problem? So how can I make this patient, or get this patient, to be more compliant and to do certain movements by taking them, putting them in a different context, right? So I think so sorry, I don't know if anybody can hear the fire engines outside. Sorry.
New York City.
I'm in New York. I have my windows open today because it's so darn hot in this apartment. But I think that's why I think we wanted to talk about the shoulder, because it is.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that we just need to keep in mind that when you have clients that come in the door, no matter what they come in the door for, ask all the questions about everything else. Because I'm going to tell you, people normalize the shoulder pain. Yeah. They normalize it and they put up with it because nothing has ever helped. And it's as bad as low back pain out there. I in my humble opinion, that's what I think, is that I see so much shoulder stuff. I don't care who it is, there's a lot of it going around and they don't talk about it. And if they have done some stuff for it, it hasn't been as successful as they had hoped. And so now they just, I just live with it. I've done this, I've done that. It doesn't really help. So I just kind of put up with it. So let's move on. This is not a problem. And it's like, it's a key piece to the, to the whole system and the way that the system coordinates. Yeah. And, being able to, if they're going to constantly move funny to get their shoulder up and around, whatever you may be doing in the lower chain may also be kind of, functionally being pulled back into that old movement pattern system, because they're still compensating for something going on up here that they've normalized and quit thinking about.
Right.
It's like, I think that likens us to the lady, she came to you for a foot problem, but it was because the way she was carrying something.
Yes.
I think it was her gown,
for
the stage. Yeah. And that totally, that had to be dealt with.
Yes.
Because it didn't matter how much you were going to exercise her foot and do stuff with her foot. It was like the whole context of where she was in trouble.
Yeah.
And so that you had to kind of look up to find out, like, what else? And what about her neck, her head, everything, the whole bit? What is this movement pattern that has emerged as something that she needs because this is a performance issue?
Right. I agree.
And how can we do this without actually changing her performance, or maybe even enhancing her performance, but not making her performance bad. You don't want to do something where they think that they're not going to be able to perform at the right level. Yeah. So awesome. Okay. I see there are people on that we
have comments.
Thank you. Yeah. Susan Winograd was here, and Annie's there. Melissa, Neva, Mandy, Chantel we're all either here and watching. So thank you for joining us today.
Hi, guys.
And if anybody has any comments, you can certainly come back in and tag us, underneath this. It'll be up on our Facebook page, and we're hoping to do another one next week.
Yeah, and
we'd love to get input about what you all want to hear about, and feel free to come in and ask questions.
Yeah, love to. I enjoy doing this. This is this has been fun for us. I hope it's been fun for you. So until next week. All right.
Yes.
Any questions,
you.
Just put it in the comments. Bye.